It's good. And not that it's cheating filling a book, but I also in mine, Tucker, maybe you could put the link up, but I've got kind of 90 CRO friends that have kind of different tips and tricks and best practices as well. So it's a good way to fill pages, but you'll find, be careful what you ask for, because you might get it, but then it's definitely a lot more work than you ever you ever think, for sure. But I am sure it will be fantastic. Absolutely. And then on the 2023 planning, so do you find, is profitability kind of more on the concept on the radar now than it was a year ago, or is it still more just kind of runway?
I think it depends on the stage of where the company is. One of the things that we've told folks is you want to think about right now, like being able to see a world where either you have 24 months of runway, or you could be cash flow positive and be profitable if you needed to be, because we don't know what will happen. And it could be, maybe it's easier to raise in a year, but it might not be. And so for companies to be able to think about, if I needed to do that, what would that look like? And that's where, and it's interesting because it's not just, we've overhired, not even just earlier stage, but we've all seen obviously layoffs happening at larger companies too, because there was overhiring or potentially people maybe not focused on what really is our go-to-market strategy, what's really the right demand channel. And now we're having to be, I think companies have to be more thoughtful about how they're really using their money.
Yeah. So speaking of which, so what advice do you have for those that have been impacted by recent layoffs in tech sales?
Yeah, because I know that is happening. I think the good thing is that they're still, while layoffs have been going on, I think I'm still hearing that, in fact, several of our companies are still planning on hiring in Q1 for sales. So I think right now we're just going through this lull of people revisiting their plan, making sure that it makes sense. But the reality is you still need to bring in revenue. And so folks are still going to need salespeople. So looking at, I feel like we're going to see more folks hiring in Q1. And then, all the things that used to work, and I was curious, I was going to ask you if you've seen things, especially in the community, people talking about it, but, networking, certainly being active on LinkedIn, using communities like this to reach out and learn more about other companies. Doing all those things now is going to help you have more connections in Q1.
I also see, and this may be a bit crass to mention, but I think people took if you want to call it a downturn, the opportunity just to kind of, up level. So there's a lot of probably performance management that should have been done. And my general observation is, people are just sloppy when it comes to performance management, when it comes to giving feedback, getting feedback, and then just a lot of just basic sales skills. Matter of fact, I do a weekly, I might be old school, and it's, all around sales skills, becoming sloppy compared to what they used to be. And as of this morning, I think they're 90% were in agreement, 10% were kind of disagreed. But I think it just comes into the whole thing. So I usually will always suggest to people that have been impacted to say, it could just be random. They had to randomly cut, but chances are they cut you versus somebody else because of you. So, while it's fresh in their mind, if you can, in a nice way, circle back and say, hey, I'd appreciate any feedback. What is it that I can do different or better, kind of from a developmental perspective? And, sometimes it may be hard to do because of HR or whatever else, but kind of, if you have been impacted, take the opportunity to go, get the feedback to figure out what is it that you can do different or better. What do you need to do to become an A player? What do you think?
I love it. In fact, I know right before this, you were talking about a bunch of questions. One of them, and I get asked this all the time, right, is like, what is some of the best advice you've gotten or that you would give people? And two things I always tell people that I feel like have helped me be successful outside of, in some cases, luck, is one, always asking for feedback. I mean, even back to my City Search story, my first VP of sales, I was probably annoyed the shit out of him. I was like, what could I have done better on that call? What could I, he's like, well, let's talk about what you did well. And I just constantly, and one of my mentors who now is also in BC, or was, Jeremy Liu, used to always say, look, feedback's a gift. You should be somebody actually wants to invest in you enough to give you feedback, instead of putting that aside, like really take that to heart. And I think that that's always helped me think about what could I be doing to get better. The second thing, and I've seen this throughout my career, you probably have too, but it's certainly kind of what you were just talking about. I think the last 2 years got even more, I guess, I don't know if it's popular is the right word, but what's happening is, if you're in sales, you have to talk to a customer and you have to do the work. And I would see folks like leaving, like, oh, but I'm getting recruited for this company and they are going to pay me $3,000 more in my base and I can make all this money. And it's like, and they said that they're going to have, it's all inbound leads and it's all this. And it's like, people are always looking for this,
shortcut
of like being in a sales job where you're going to make $300,000 for doing nothing. And I'm here to tell you that that does not exist. Like, my best salespeople are always the ones that were better at, even if they had an SDR, and I did this, a long time ago, we didn't have SDRs then, but like they still prospect their own accounts. They're the best at discovery. They're really good at, at really understanding what their customer needs and matching that. And continuing, but they also just continue to improve themselves too. Like you said, figuring out what could I be doing better. And that's those folks are the folks that end up really making a great career in sales, not the ones that, it's the job. If you keep moving every 8 months, you're never going to really have a great career in sales.
Totally. When I was an exec at HP, I'd go on sales calls and I'd say, do you have any feedback for me? And they'd be, shocked and, I have to get used to it. And I'd say, well, they may or may not have some for me, what I could do different or better. And I'd say, can I give you some feedback? So just by the virtue of saying, can I give you some feedback? People kind of open up, they're warmer about it. They're ready to be receptive. Then eventually it got to a point where, okay, Randy's going to do this, Randy's doing this, everybody else should do it. Then we do these sales kickoffs and I would kind of role play and I say, okay, everybody, turn to somebody to your right and then say, hey, can I give you some feedback? And then just role play, but just kind of that, just culturally, doing that does make people get better. And then, not that it's the only thing, but certainly can avoid the risk of potentially getting laid off or cut. So we can talk about that all day too, but let's move on. What about advice for people breaking into tech sales?
I feel it's probably very similar, right? So I'd say, first of all, go somewhere where if you want to be in tech sales where you're going to actually learn and they're going to invest in you as a person. In a lot of cases, I know nowadays it's starting as an SDR, but go somewhere where it's actually, we're going to teach you. We coach, we use, it's not hey, we're going to throw you on the phones for 3 months. And then if you're doing well, we'll, put you out in the field. Even though that sounds enticing and it sounds great, I promise you learning the actual skills is you take that with you wherever you go. Like, go somewhere where they're going to invest in you, where they're coaching, where you've got a sales leader that you respect, that you feel like you could learn from, and that it's a product you're passionate about. It's so much easier to be excited about learning and growing when you understand the product, especially from the customer's perspective. Like, what are you actually solving for that customer, and can you get behind that? Can you have conversations about that? Because that's when that's going to show through on calls, and it's going to make you a better salesperson, from everything from prospecting to discovery to actually working with that company.
Totally. It's really being a student of the game, right? So it's not, people say, oh, they're born with it or whatever, but those I think that are the best are students. They'll study, they kind of are sponges from people, from books, from everything else that exists. So before you're talking about teaching, so you do a class, I think, with Sales Impact Academy. There you go. With Sales Impact Academy on leadership. So maybe first tell us about Sales Impact Academy, since that could be a great resource to several people watching this.
Yeah. So Sales Impact Academy is a school for all sales roles. And they really started with SDR and AE are the primary roles, but they do have some classes now for leadership, for CS, and for RevOps.
Yeah.
And one of the things I actually started working with them before, so we did invest in them at stage 2, but I was already working with them beforehand. I had always felt like and try to share it one off whenever people ask me about questions about leadership or how to do something. And my co-coach, Pete Crosby, who I just mentioned earlier, is in the UK. He and I have both felt the same way. Like, gosh, we wish there was a way where we could just teach people, and we wish there was a class we had gone to, or somebody said, look, here's how to do planning the right way. Here's how to actually hire people the right way. Here's how to manage people. Here's how do you set your people up for success? How do you deal with certain things that are happening? And so that's what we put together. But for Sales Impact Academy itself, one of the things when I put on my operator hat, I know that in my own organizations, career paths are really important for me because I wanted people to be able to come in and feel like, okay, we could map back to like, what does success look as an SDR? What do you have to master before you could become an AE? Because that's going to be important. What do you need to do to become a senior AE? But we had to do all this stuff in-house ourselves, and pulling in content and having an enablement team do that. And what SIA does is comes to you with this and says, hey, you want your SDRs to learn these 5 or 6 skills? Great. Boom, here are the classes that we have, by the way, taught by people that are usually really good at that. So you're getting them taught by experts, and then they take and then they get certified at the end of that class. So as a revenue leader, you're developing your people, you're giving them the opportunities that I just mentioned that people should go to.
Yeah.
But you're not having to build all that in-house. You're actually getting it from somebody that's already done probably better than you would hire in-house anyway. So it's such an amazing resource.
Yeah, I don't know if it's a good analogy. I think of them as a kind of Peloton app for sales training.
Mm-hmm.
So you can do some live, you can do some recording. So anyway, so as a reminder here, anybody watching along, feel free to ask any questions or make any comments as well. So moving on, I know you're passionate about several things, but you've got a point of view on how to improve revenue in the current environment, and you say it's not more pipeline.
Right. So going back to our growth at all costs, not a thing anymore. It really is about, first start with your current customers and making sure like who is a fit for our product. Are there opportunities to grow? I was right before this call talking to a portfolio company where that's what they just did. They went and looked at, okay, we've already signed up 90 customers, and they identified that half of them were really the right fit for them to think about growth opportunities, but putting a growth plan in place there. And then making sure that you are focused on, from the new customer perspective, bringing people in that look like that. And also thinking about people that are the right targets for now, right? As we think about, in the same way that folks had to pivot at the beginning of 2020 because restaurants are closing, so you weren't going to go sell to restaurants most likely. You also want to think about, can you sell into verticals that are more resistant right now, who potentially aren't thinking about cutting spend, and depending on what your focus is, and also how is your value prop right now, because the value prop of, a lot of people are looking for more efficiency. They're looking to do more with less. So do you have a value prop that fits the way people are thinking about running their business next year versus, hey, we're going to help you grow 4 or 5 times revenue? That might not be the value prop that folks are thinking about now.
Yeah, I mean, speaking of value, I think, when times are tight, the CFO is probably a lot more involved in the decision-making process. And, I always like to say, okay, so if you're going to bump into the CFO in the elevator and you have 15 seconds, what are you going to say? it's not a bunch of technical gobbledygook. It's going to be how you're going to help them generate revenue, how you're going to help them save money, how you're going to help them stay out of jail if it's a compliance solution. But it's really kind of a handful of specific market share and some other things that go along with revenue. But it's really how are you going to help in those areas. And if your solution does not help identify that, it's a much tougher sales process these days, right?
Yeah, I mean, I'll give you an example of one of our portfolio companies, Meaningful Gigs. They are a talent marketplace for designers. What's unique about them is the design talent that that is on their platform are folks from Africa. So it's a very unique design skill set that a lot of companies, and they sell to enterprise companies in the US, are looking for. But 2 years ago, the value prop was, hey, you can't find enough people, you can't hire fast enough. We've got this unique talent. It's a lot easier. And you've got this project that comes up, rather than trying to go through an agency, you can get somebody onboarded in 2 minutes. So then it was all about speed and the cost, even though it probably is a little bit less in some cases, that really wasn't a thing. Now it's more about, hey, a lot of these folks are, because people don't want as many full-time employees, we're your outsourced team. You don't have to have those people on your, that you're paying benefits for. Right. You can leverage us. It's better quality at a better price. So a very different value prop than where, and they're seeing a lot of success with that value prop now resonating to the same decision maker. But you're right, because the mindset has changed.
Yeah, and even think of sales bricks, right? So if the high level value prop is, sales teams can sell, I'll make it up, twice as fast, and therefore sell twice as much, because then they can kind of cover more ground because the config price quote isn't taking as long. What's efficiency for that? I would think huge.